This is Including You, the new series from Lead at Any Level. Including You features stories from chief diversity officers and other executives who are creating inclusive cultures in their organizations. Our goal is to show what's working in companies just like yours, to give you the tools you need to keep pushing for progress in your own workplace. We want to create belonging and opportunity for everyone, including you. And now here's your host, Amy C. Waninger.
Welcome back to Including You. I'm your host, Amy C. Waninger, the Inclusion Catalyst. My guest today is Dr. Ana Maria Lopez Caldwell. She's a certified professional coach and a social scientist, fellowship and scholarship winning Latina immigrant with over 15 years of global experience in inclusive leadership. She's the founder of Dr. Ana María LC, where she helps leaders who want to work toward inclusion in an authentic and empowered way. She also works as a consultant for Hyphens and Spaces with Samira Abdul Karim, who was a recent guest on this show. Dr. Ana Maria, welcome to the show.
Amy, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation today.
I am excited to talk to you. Now, I told you that we're going to jump right into questions, but I want to go back to your PhD and what you studied, what your doctorate is in. Can you share that with my listeners? Because I found this absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a PhD in Latin American Studies, and I research the socioeconomic stratification system in Colombia. And I was particularly interested in the concept of symbolic boundaries and ways essentially in which society, particularly in this case, in which Colombian society categorized people and decided who belonged and who did not belong. So that research actually was super helpful in terms of informing a lot of my priorities now that I work as a consultant and coach, because that question around belonging continues to be so central and so important to people's satisfaction at the workplace and people's ability to feel authentic and be able to be their full self. So that PhD experience was just a really amazing opportunity to learn and to be trained in a very formal way. And while being in this ivory tower of education where I am in many ways following all of the societal norms and like jumping all of the hoops that are expected, I was doing it with a very intentional lens to see, okay, how can I center and uplift and highlight the sources of knowledge that are usually on the margins? What does academia deem to be legitimate, and how can I find what may not be as legitimate and bring it to the center through this voice that I have and the privilege that I have as a PhD student? So that was a great experience for sure. Thanks for your question.
Of course, I would imagine that those boundaries and norms are easier to see when we're outside of the system and much harder to see when we're inside. Has that been your experience?
That is a great observation. And I would say absolutely, because actually we were facilitating a conversation and my co-facilitator brought up this example. And I think it really applies to your observation here. It's like being a fish in the water or being a human walking around on Earth, where we need oxygen to survive, but we're not thinking about that oxygen. We're just going around about our business. But the moment we don't have that oxygen, that becomes like really apparent, and that's something really obvious to us. Or if we're a fish out of the water, same concept. So absolutely, if you're in a space where you belong and your identity is not being questioned, then you may not be necessarily conscious about some of those privileges that you have. And when the opposite is happening, you're in a different position where that actually becomes a roadblock for you to be able to achieve your goals, for you to be able to connect, etc. And now that becomes something more urgent, more pressing, more obvious in your life.
And you use your studies and your experience and all of this in your coaching and consulting practice, I understand. And you work with a lot of C-suite leaders and a lot of Latino leaders as well at different levels of organizations, specifically leaders who are trying to connect better with the people that they lead and the people that they serve. Can you talk a little bit about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the recurring clients that I get are folks who are well-intentioned, they're thinking about their own identities, and they are in positions of power, making really difficult decisions in moments where there's this zero-sum game in terms of resources, time, so many priorities competing against each other. And leaders may sometimes feel isolated, or they may not be seeing eye to eye with some of their colleagues and feeling a little bit disenfranchised as as their leadership goes on. And so those are clients that often come to me to process the interactions that they may be having with their team, to talk through, okay, for example, I am a leader, a Latina woman who's a leader. And from one perspective, there are parts of my identity that may be at a disadvantage. And I feel like I need to defend myself. And also as a woman, I need to be more assertive. And there are other parts of my identity that may put me in a position of power, like the leadership position, or the fact that I may be white presenting to some. And so how does one navigate the nuance of those different identities to both feel authentic, like internally? How does a leader come to terms and process and feel comfortable and authentic under their skin? And then what are the ways in which they can navigate and strategize and work with their team to really be able to connect and show their vulnerability and show those different layers that they may hold based on their intersectionalities? I just said a lot of things, but I guess to go back in scope and just look at big picture. So leaders come to me thinking about their own internal identity and ways in which they are processing and managing that in this ever-changing environment. And then externally, very much looking for support around interpersonal dynamics, how to take feedback, how to not take it personal, how to support folks.
And so with all of that in mind, what do you think is driving this as a priority for those leaders? Is it career mobility? Is it employee retention? Are there other factors at play?
I think it really depends leader by leader. People may have different priorities depending on where in their career they are. If they're a brand new leader who just got this position, there may be some insecurities, there may be some imposter syndrome, and there may be like that space where leaders are really looking to fit in, to be liked, to be approved. And then more seasoned leaders may be in a different position where they may be really battling burnout, and they may be feeling a little bit like, I have tried all of these solutions and a little bit like, I've worked so hard and I've done all those things, and I may not be seeing the results that I want to see. So it really varies depending on the person. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of being a good coach and a supportive coach, is to, first and foremost, not have an agenda of what it is that I need a client to do or think or be at. It is meeting the client where they are at and really, truly listening. And active listening is a skill that I think is incredibly difficult to really master, and that we oftentimes underestimate. And so being able to offer a client just a true sense of active listening and trying to get at the root of what it may be there for them to help them grow and navigate through their own leadership is very important.
And so what do you do with your clients, or what do you work with your clients on them to do that really moves the needle in terms of their authentic and inclusive leadership journey?
That's a great question. And that's another one that it really depends on who you are. We all as individuals have in areas that really impact the way we behave and impact the way that inform the way we move around the world. And oftentimes we are not aware of what those things are and how those things may impact our interactions and our priorities and how we move around the world. And so helping a leader identify what may be like the North Star for them, or what may be the foundation that builds some of that, is really important. Going back to that question of how to really support a leader to be able for them to move the needle, it is getting at the core what may be there for them. And I'll give you a more concrete example, which is myself, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do. I came to this country when I was turning 13, And I was undocumented from the time I was in middle school all the way to the beginning of college. And because of that, I had a pretty strong sense of feeling a lack of belonging. And I was fed by society this idea that I did not belong in the United States. And because of that, part of my survival mechanism was to work really hard, was to try to assimilate to the culture, was to prove to other people that I got it, that I'm good and I deserve to be here. And because of that, that's part of the reason why I was able to get full scholarships in all the programs that I attended and get a PhD and become an executive director and all of these things. There was a lot of internal motivations. And I think that idea of not belonging and that idea of having to prove myself really exacerbated and impacted some of my actions and some of like my feelings around my interactions with people. But I was going around the world doing these things, not conscious that I was a driver. And through therapy, which I recommend to all of the listeners here in the show, I was able to figure that out. My therapist helped me, pointed that out for me. And when she did that, my entire outlook on my leadership and the way I engage in the United States completely changed. And it helped me unlearn a lot of things, become more authentic, and be able to show up in the workplace, show up as a leader in a way that I wasn't able to do so before because I wasn't liberated and I was not in a place that I recognize why. And so that would be a more concrete example of the type of transformational work that I support executives on. We all have something that may be driving us to behave a certain way. And so figuring that out is a big part of the support that I can offer.
It's funny that you mentioned that because for years, I thought we went to therapy to fix what was wrong with us. And it's only very recently that I've learned we go to therapy to understand why we do what we do. And that's really the whole point of it, is just to figure that out. And it's that self-awareness that then allows us to be more authentic and more intentional about how we behave, how we respond, how we relate to other people. And as leaders, the more self-aware we are, the more other aware we can be. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And that really will have an impact on your emotional intelligence in the way that you have more empathy for your employees and you begin to pick up on how folks may be dealing with different issues that may have to do with their identity or may have to do with something else. But as a leader, being in touch with that is super important. And Amy, I'm so glad you brought up this idea of therapy and your thoughts on that. I would want to add another layer there, which is as an executive coach, people often ask, what's the difference between therapy and a coach? And one easy way to think about it is therapy a lot of times focuses on looking at the past and unpacking and processing traumas. And I am not a therapist, so I'm sure that there is also a more wholesome definition for therapy. And then when it comes to executive coaching, we are looking at identifying where you are at now. What are some of your roadblocks? What are your goals moving forward? And really focusing on action and ways in which, like yourself and your motivations and who you are may be stopping you or maybe preventing you from some goals that you really want for yourself. And so it's more focused on the present and moving towards the future.
Thank you for that clarification, because that is a question that comes up a lot when I talk to people in this space. And it's a question that I always ask because people have slightly different definitions or slightly different nuances in the way they explain it. And that was helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm curious, what results do your clients see when they work with you? How do you know what you're doing is working for them?
Yeah, that is a great question. Feedback. Clients will, and I will add something else. There is executive coaching and I also do consulting. So that looks a little bit different. And so measuring those results look a little bit different. When I am working as a consultant, folks are oftentimes looking for additional projects. So that's one way in which I measure success in terms of our engagement with folks. They're saying, okay, thank you for this contract. Here's this other thing. And we think you'll be great for doing that. So that's one way, like recurring clients, really important. In terms of outcomes for the clients themselves, we aim, and so when I think about both coaching and consulting, is that I am offering and providing tools for folks that go beyond me solving an issue for them, and rather supporting them in their own journey for them to make the decisions themselves and grow themselves. So it is very much, and I'm just going to talk about coaching because it could get blurry in terms of outcomes. So let's just focus on coaching. So for coaching, it is very much about a client at the end of an engagement having been able to say, okay, I set out to do this goal, or like when I hired you, I really wanted to work on feeling liberated as a coach, as a leader, for example, or whatever it is that their goal may be. And by the end of that engagement, I have achieved that. And I feel independent enough to be able to do so without your support moving forward. So being able to see folks grow and do this work and be empowered to continue their own goals without my help is one way in which I see success. Obviously, I love when they like, hey, I have this other goal, or I want to work on this other thing. Wonderful. But just being really clear that this is not like the coach-client relationship is not one in which I'm solving problems for them, but rather we are partnering. They are having this desire and this vulnerability to grow and to change. And then they are finding transformation along the way.
Got it. So where do you want to go next with your coaching practice? What do you ultimately want to achieve, or what are you looking to achieve in, let's say, the next 1 to 3 years?
So I want to continue working with leaders. I am loving this work that I'm doing and just the connections that I'm making with folks. So I would just love to continue having a nice schedule where I continue to have lots of interested clients working. And along the way, also continuing to grow in terms of research and support that I can offer folks. For example, I am currently working on an initiative to engage HR managers to just gain additional insight in terms of, from their perspective, what they may be seeing their executive leaders need, and what may be some of the tools that they are lacking and they're looking support for. In addition to this continued engagement with executives, I am looking to connect with HR managers, and also I'm looking to continue having opportunities to share a little bit about my story and provide some talks and do some visits at organizations. That was something that I was a little bit shy about. I wasn't sure if there was a space for that. I was like, I don't know if I want to talk about myself. Like, that just seems weird. But I have reflected on it, and like the times that I've done it, there's just people resonate with it so much. And I realized that it takes a lot of courage also to share stories when you may not be in a position of privilege, or it may not be like a popular opinion for some in terms of my status or being an immigrant or having an accent. And so I decided that because this is something that really is able to allow others to feel seen, to feel represented, it is something that I'm willing and excited to do now.
Excellent. I am sure you will do great at all of it. I think you're amazing, and I'm so glad to have had you on the show. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? We'll put the link to your LinkedIn profile and your company and all of that in the show notes, but is there somewhere that you want to send people who are listening?
Yeah, go to that LinkedIn. There is a link tree there that will send you to all of the ways in which you can connect with me, including a consultation call. So you could just go ahead and book me, and we could just chat and learn about what it is that you need and figure out if there is a fit. Please feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ana Maria. I'm so glad to have talked to you.
Thank you, Amy. This was so fun.
If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Lead at Any Level on LinkedIn and YouTube. Then join us for Including You video simulcast every Thursday at noon Eastern. Including You can also be enjoyed each week as part of the Living Corporate audio podcast series, available on all major podcast platforms. Learn more at living-corporate.com. Including You is brought to you in part by Lead at Any Level, a boutique training and consulting firm improving employee engagement and retention for companies that promote from within. Lead at Any Level. Leaders can be anywhere and should be everywhere. Learn more at leadatanylevel.com. Lead at Any Level and its logo are registered trademarks of Lead at Any Level LLC. The views and opinions of guests on our show do not necessarily reflect the positions of Lead at Any Level, Living Corporate, or the sponsors of Including You.
That's it for this week's episode of Including You. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to leave us a review or some comments to let us know what you thought of the episode and help others find us as well. Be sure to join me next week when my guest will be Dr. Suzanne Wertheim, author of The Inclusive Language